Marcus Chen was only 42 years old, but in Silicon Valley, his name was already legendary. CEO of Chen Technologies, self-made billionaire. Every morning when he stepped out of his Tesla, he felt invincible. To him, success meant the most expensive car, the biggest office, the most power. But Marcus had no idea that this morning would change his life forever. That's when he saw it. Among the rows of sensible sedans and modern hybrids sat the most pathetic excuse for a bicycle Marcus had ever seen. Rusty, duct-taped, literally held together with wire. In that moment, Marcus saw only the surface, an embarrassment, a joke, something that didn't belong. He had absolutely no idea he was looking at the future. Henry Morrison was 63 years old, a janitor. He cleaned offices at night and arrived every morning on that rusty bicycle. Most people walked past him every day and never truly saw him. Marcus noticed him that morning, but for all the wrong reasons. Marcus couldn't resist. With employees watching, he made his move. "That's quite the vehicle you've got there," he said, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "Does it even have gears? Or do you just push it uphill?" A few nervous laughs rippled through the crowd. Henry simply smiled sadly and walked away, understanding something Marcus didn't, that cruelty always reveals more about the person giving it than the person receiving it. Henry didn't defend himself, didn't explain, didn't fight back. He just said, "Have a good day, Mr. Chen," and walked away. But in his mind, he knew something Marcus couldn't imagine. That bicycle represented 15 years of revolutionary work. It represented the future. And someday, maybe Marcus would understand. Maybe. 3 weeks later, Marcus's perfect world shattered. The EPA had discovered that his Nevada facility had been dumping toxic chemicals into groundwater for 18 months. Children were sick, water was poisoned, and his company's stock was in free fall. Everything he'd built was crumbling because someone under his watch had chosen profits over people. 20 million people watched a mother cry about her child's illness. The hashtag Chen pollution was everywhere. Stock prices crashed. Everything Marcus thought he'd achieved was built on poison ground. And for the first time in his privileged life, he couldn't strategy his way out. This was real. People were hurt. Children were sick. Because of his company. That night, Marcus stood alone in his office, 70 stories above the city he thought he'd conquered. Somewhere out there, families were afraid to drink their water. Children were in hospitals, all because of decisions made under his leadership. The weight of that crushed him. He needed a miracle to save his company. He had no idea that miracle was already in his building, rusting in the parking lot, waiting to be seen. It was 9 o'clock when Marcus discovered them. Dr. Lisa Zhang, his head of advanced research, and Henry the janitor, examining what looked like an engine. But this wasn't a cleaning visit. Henry was teaching, explaining, creating. And Dr. Zhang, one of the smartest engineers Marcus had ever hired, was calling his work revolutionary. The device on that table looked simple, elegant. But Dr. Zhang's voice was filled with awe. "This engine runs on water. Plain tap water. Henry invented it. He's been testing it for 3 years on his bicycle." Marcus felt like he'd been punched in the gut. That rusty bike, the one he'd mocked mercilessly, was running on technology worth billions. Technology that could save the planet. And he'd laughed at it. Henry explained calmly, like he'd done this 1,000 times. The catalyst breaks down water molecules. Hydrogen feeds into the fuel cell. Electricity powers the motor. The only output is water vapor. 15 years of work. 15 years of testing. And he'd done it all while cleaning offices at night. While everyone walked past him. While Marcus mocked him. Marcus could barely speak. "Why would you help me?" he finally asked. "After what I said. After how I treated you." The question hung in the air like an accusation. Henry's answer was simple. "This isn't about you, Mr. Chen. It's about the planet. About those poison wells. About my grandchildren's future. If your company can use this technology responsibly, my pride is a small price to pay." In that moment, standing in a laboratory at 9 p.m., Marcus Chen received something he didn't deserve, a second chance, given to him by the very man he'd tried to humiliate. Henry's rusty bicycle wasn't a joke. It was a test, and Marcus had failed it spectacularly. But now, somehow, he was being offered redemption. The question was, would he be worthy of it? For 3 intense weeks, Marcus practically lived in that lab, testing, retesting, validating every impossible claim. And incredibly, they all checked out. 93% energy efficiency, 0 harmful emissions, just clean water vapor. Henry's garage invention was outperforming billions of dollars in corporate research. The rusty bicycle had been revolutionary all along. It just hadn't been looking. The bicycle was just the beginning. They scaled up, built the car version. The first test drive was unforgettable, smooth, quiet, powerful. Dr. Zhang drove it 200 miles on less than a gallon of water. The engineers were speechless. Marcus watched the data streaming across monitors and felt something he hadn't felt in years. Genuine awe, not at his own achievements, but at what someone else had created. Everything changed for Henry. The invisible man became indispensable. Engineers sought his wisdom. Marcus treated him as an equal, no, as a teacher. But here's the profound truth. Henry himself hadn't changed. He was the same patient, brilliant person he'd always been. Only now, people were finally seeing him. The lesson was clear. Value doesn't change based on recognition. Recognition just reveals what was always there. Late one night, Marcus asked the question that had been bothering him. Why did you dedicate your life to this when you might never see it succeed? Henry's answer revealed everything. My father died from coal mining disease. I watched pollution destroy my hometown. I wanted to prove we could have progress without poison. But I didn't trust the system to use it responsibly. Until maybe now. You're being tested, Mr. Chen. Not with technology, with trust. In that moment, Marcus understood what Henry had been teaching all along. Success wasn't about the biggest office or the most expensive watch. It wasn't about crushing competitors or maximizing quarterly profits. Real success was about solving problems that mattered, creating value that helped people, building something that would make the world better, not just make you richer. Henry, the janitor, understood this, and Marcus, the billionaire CEO, was just beginning to learn. The board meeting was make or break. These investors had watched their stock plummet during the contamination crisis. Their patience was exhausted. Marcus stood before them with the solution to everything. But would they believe it? Would they embrace it? Or would they see it as just another desperate gamble by a CEO trying to save his sinking ship? Dr. Zhang walked them through 20 minutes of irrefutable data. Test videos, efficiency ratings, cost comparisons. The numbers were extraordinary. Customer retention projections off the charts. But then came the real shock, the reveal of who had invented it all. The room was about to learn a lesson in humility they would never forget. Marcus's voice was steady. This technology was developed by Henry Morrison. Some of you may recognize Henry as the man who's been cleaning your offices every night for 7 years. The man who rode that rusty bicycle to work. Silence. Complete, suffocating silence. Every person in that room had walked past Henry hundreds of times, never really seeing him, never imagining. The janitor was the genius, and they had all been blind. Then Marcus dropped the real bombshell. 50% of all profits go to environmental cleanup worldwide. The room erupted. That's insane, they shouted. You're giving away billions. But Marcus held his ground. This wasn't just about saving the company anymore. It was about proving that businesses could be wildly successful and ethically responsible. That profit and purpose weren't enemies. They were partners. Then Henry spoke, his voice cutting through the shouting like a knife through silk. If Chen Technologies isn't the right partner for this vision, I can take my patents elsewhere. Everything stopped. Suddenly, every person in that room understood. Without Henry's catalyst formula, the technology was worthless. The janitor they'd ignored for 7 years held all the cards. And he was using that power not for revenge or personal wealth, but to ensure his life's work would heal, not harm. One by one, hands went up, some enthusiastically, others reluctantly, but they all went up. The board voted yes. 50% to environmental restoration, Chen Technologies would be profitable and responsible. They had a path forward. They had hope. And most importantly, they had proof that a company could change, that people could change, that success and ethics weren't mutually exclusive. The rusty bicycle had just transformed corporate America. 3 months later, the world was watching. 2,000 people filled the Chen Technologies Plaza. Media from every major outlet. Cameras everywhere. Speculation had been building for weeks. Some thought it was a publicity stunt to distract from the EPA scandal. Others believed it was breakthrough solar technology. Nobody, absolutely nobody, had guessed the truth. That a janitor's rusty bicycle was about to change everything. Marcus didn't start with excuses. He started with truth. We contaminated drinking water. We made children sick. We betrayed your trust. No defensive language. No corporate doublespeak. Just accountability. The crowd went silent, surprised by the raw honesty. This wasn't a typical corporate apology. This was a man who had genuinely transformed, speaking from a changed heart. You could hear the authenticity in every word. I want to introduce you to the man who taught me what real success looks like, Marcus said, his voice thick with emotion. Henry Morrison. The applause started slow, then built like thunder. People stood. Cameras flashed. And Henry walked onto that stage. The invisible man made visible. The janitor revealed as the genius. This was his moment. Not because he sought it, but because the world needed to see that innovation can come from anywhere. Henry's voice was quiet but steady. I'm not much for speeches, but I want you to understand something. I spent 15 years working on this technology because climate change doesn't care about your bank account. Pollution doesn't check your credit score. We all breathe the same air. We all drink the same water. This isn't about me. It's about making clean energy available to everyone, not just the wealthy. Everyone. Dr. Zhang walked them through it step by step. Water goes in. Catalyst breaks it down. Hydrogen feeds the fuel cell. Electricity powers the motor. Water vapor comes out. That's it. No complex chemistry. No dangerous materials. Just elegant engineering. And the numbers were undeniable. 93% efficient. $2 to drive 500 miles. 0 harmful emissions. This wasn't science fiction. It was science fact. And it was about to change the automotive industry forever. Then came the announcement that would reshape corporate thinking forever. 50% of all profits from this technology will fund environmental cleanup efforts worldwide. The crowd erupted. This wasn't just about clean cars. It was about cleaning up the mess we'd already made. Chen Technologies wasn't just creating clean technology. They were using it to heal the damage of the industrial age. Profit with purpose. Success with responsibility. The paradigm was shifting in real time. The media went wild. Questions shouted from every direction. Within minutes, social media exploded with positive reactions. The same platforms that had destroyed Chen Technologies with hashtags like Chen Pollution were now celebrating with Water Engine and Clean Future. Stock prices surged 43% in an hour. Environmental groups that had been protesting were now offering partnerships. The rusty bicycle had officially changed the world. 1 year later, the promises had become reality. The Nevada town's water was now cleaner than it had been in 30 years. New parks where children played safely. A health clinic providing free care to affected families. Scholarships for every child. Chen Technologies hadn't just cleaned up their mess. They'd invested in the community's future. Numbers on a spreadsheet had become real lives transformed. The transformation went global. Water engine vehicles on roads across 6 continents. 2 billion people gaining access to clean water and power. 43 countries implementing the technology. Oil industry stocks plummeting as investors rushed to renewables. This wasn't just one company's success story. This was humanity choosing a different path. And it all started with one janitor who refused to give up on his dream. The 1-year anniversary celebration wasn't held at corporate headquarters. It was held in the town Chen Technologies had poisoned. This was Marcus's choice. Face the people you hurt. Celebrate with the community you're restoring. No corporate spin. No carefully managed photo ops. Just authentic connection with real people whose lives his company had damaged and was now helping heal. Mayor Rosa Martinez had refused to even meet with Marcus a year ago. Now, she stood before her community with a different message. I won't lie to you. I hated Chen Technologies. I wanted them destroyed. But over this year, I've watched them follow through on every single promise. I watched them go beyond what was legally required. They've earned something I never thought I'd give, my trust. Not complete trust, not yet, but enough to say thank you. Marcus moved through the crowd, but not as a CEO making an appearance. He listened, really listened, to stories of fear during the contamination, to gratitude for the cleanup, to cautious hope for the future. Each conversation reminded him why this work mattered. These weren't statistics in a report. They were real people, families, lives, and they deserved so much more than his company had initially given them. That evening, Marcus and Henry sat together watching children play in the park that wouldn't exist without Henry's invention and Marcus's transformation. Do you ever regret giving me the technology? Marcus asked. Henry thought carefully. I gave it to you because I saw potential. Not in the technology, I knew that worked. In you. You had the power to make real change happen. You just needed to understand why you should. Henry continued, sometimes we need to hit rock bottom before we can rise. That parking lot moment, your cruelty, became the catalyst for everything that followed. Your worst moment became the beginning of your best work. That's the beautiful thing about life. We're never beyond redemption. We just have to be willing to change. And you were willing, Marcus. That's what made the difference. 2 years after that parking lot morning, Marcus returned to Davos, but as a completely different person with a radically different message. The same business leaders who once celebrated his aggressive tactics now listened as he challenged everything they believed about success. I want to tell you about a rusty bicycle, he began. And for the next 40 minutes, he dismantled decades of corporate dogma. Marcus gave them what they understood. Numbers. 97% customer retention when the industry averages 63. Valuation exceeding $500 billion. But here's the revolutionary part. They achieved this while giving away 50% of profits to environmental restoration. Profit and purpose weren't opposites. They were multipliers. Companies doing good attracted more customers, more loyalty, more long-term value than those focused solely on short-term gains. A fossil fuel CEO challenged him. Easy for you with revolutionary technology. Most companies don't have that luxury. Marcus didn't hesitate. The question isn't whether your industry will change. It's whether you'll lead that change or be destroyed by it. We took massive short-term losses admitting our contamination. Our stock dropped for 3 weeks, then it never stopped climbing. Investors aren't stupid. They know which direction the future is heading. You can resist and become obsolete or adapt and thrive. After the speech, a young startup founder approached Marcus with tears in her eyes. 3 years ago, I heard you speak before your transformation. I wanted to be like that Marcus, ruthless, dominant, winning at any cost. I built my company that way and made everyone around me miserable, including myself. She paused, emotion thick in her voice. Then I read about the bicycle. I realized I didn't want to be the old Marcus Chen. I wanted to be the new one. So I changed everything. And we're actually more successful now. And happy. Marcus watched ideas spread through the conference like ripples in water. Small conversations turning into intense discussions. Business cards exchanged. Follow-up meetings scheduled. CEOs calling their strategy teams right there in the hallway. This was how change actually happened. Not through regulations or mandates, but through proof. Through one company demonstrating that another way was possible. And now hundreds of leaders were asking themselves, if Chen Technologies could transform, why couldn't we? 10 years after that parking lot morning, Marcus stood in a village in rural Kenya. He was no longer CEO. He'd passed that role to Dr. Zhang 3 years earlier. Now he spent his time in places like this, communities gaining clean water and power for the first time. 5,000 people whose lives were transforming because a janitor had refused to give up on his rusty bicycle. This was what success really looked like. The system was designed for local ownership. Kenyan engineers trained to maintain it. Simple controls that didn't require advanced education. Spare parts available regionally. This wasn't charity, it was infrastructure. It wasn't dependency, it was empowerment. Chen Humanitarian Technologies had learned that the best development work makes itself obsolete. Give people tools and knowledge, then step back and let them build their own future. The village chief led Marcus to the new school. On the wall hung Henry's photograph with words painted carefully below. Henry Morrison, the man who brought us tomorrow. Marcus broke down completely. Henry had passed away 18 months earlier, still tinkering until the end. He never got to see this village, never met these children. But his work was here, changing lives he'd never know about. That's what real legacy means, impact that outlives you, spreading to places you'll never see. Marcus carried Henry's final letter everywhere, worn soft from constant reading. The words he returned to whenever doubt crept in. The bicycle was never about technology. It was about showing that value doesn't depend on recognition. That quiet persistence changes the world. That every person has dignity and potential. Keep teaching that lesson. Keep living it. Henry's voice still guiding him. Still teaching. Even in death, the janitor remained his most important mentor. Elder Kofi spoke slowly so translation could keep pace. Your story is like our ancient tales. The proud man who learns humility, the treasure hidden in plain sight, the wise teacher disguised as a servant. But the most powerful part is that it's true. And because it's true, it gives us hope that change is possible. He smiled warmly. You came thinking you were bringing gifts to us. But we have gifts for you too. Teaching about community, harmony with nature, finding joy in simple things. Your friend Henry understood this. He knew wisdom flows both directions. As Marcus prepared to leave, the children gathered with a gift. A tiny bicycle crafted from wire and metal scraps, painted blue with rust spots. A perfect miniature of Henry's original. So you remember us, a young girl explained through the translator. So you remember that we were here, that we mattered. Marcus held that small bicycle like it contained the entire universe. I will treasure this forever, he said, voice breaking. And I will never, ever forget you. 15 years after that parking lot morning, the rusty bicycle found its permanent home. Not in a junkyard where Marcus once thought it belonged, but in a museum bearing Henry's name. A place where thousands would come to learn the lesson that changed everything. That value doesn't depend on recognition. That genius can come from anywhere. That every person deserves to be truly seen. There it sat, the rusty bicycle, preserved behind glass like the Mona Lisa. And in a way, it was just as valuable, not in dollars, but in what it taught humanity. Thousands of visitors came each year to see it. Engineers studied its design. Business students contemplated its lessons. Children touched the glass and dreamed, each person asking themselves, what am I overlooking? Who am I not seeing? What possibilities am I missing? Sophie returned to the bicycle, now 20 years old. She remembered being 10, touching those rusty handlebars while Henry told her about persistence and duct tape representing solved problems. Now, she held an MIT acceptance letter for advanced catalyst research. I want to improve his work, she told Marcus. Make it even more efficient and accessible. Spend my life like Henry did, solving problems because they need solving. The bicycle had planted a seed. Now, it was blooming. Marcus stood alone with the bicycle one last time that day. 60 years old, fully retired, at peace. He thought about the arrogant man he'd been 15 years ago, cruel, blind, measuring worth by price tags and status symbols. That man felt like a stranger now. The transformation had been long and difficult, but had been possible. That was the message he wanted everyone to understand. Change is always possible. Redemption is always available. Your worst moment can become your best teacher. Then Marcus noticed something he'd never seen before, a tiny engraving on the frame, so small he had to press close to the glass to read it. In Henry's careful handwriting, for everyone who feels invisible, your value doesn't depend on being seen. Marcus's tears fell freely. Even working alone in his garage with no audience, Henry had been thinking about others, about janitors and overlooked people everywhere, proving they mattered, proving they had power, proving they could change the world. The impact had spread beyond imagination. 17 major corporations adopted the profit-sharing model. Global carbon emissions dropped 43%. 2.1 billion people gained clean water access. 437 contaminated sites fully cleaned. Thousands of young engineers inspired. Dozens of business schools teaching the case study. And it all traced back to one rusty bicycle that nobody had noticed until one cruel moment forced everyone to look closer and see what had been there all along. Marcus's book became required reading in business schools worldwide. But more importantly, it reached ordinary people, janitors, maintenance workers, people in overlooked jobs wondering if they mattered. They found hope in his honest account of failure and transformation. They saw themselves in Henry's story, and they were inspired to persist in their own quiet revolutions, knowing that value exists whether or not anyone recognizes it. The book wasn't just telling a story, it was changing lives. The museum attracted everyone. Engineers studied Henry's technical notebooks. Business students contemplated the ethical transformation. Children dreamed about becoming inventors. But everyone, absolutely everyone, who stood before that rusty bicycle was forced to confront the same questions. What am I overlooking? Who am I not seeing? What genius am I dismissing because I'm judging by appearances? The bicycle didn't just preserve history. It challenged every visitor to see more clearly in their own lives. That night, Marcus wrote in his journal, a practice he'd maintained for 15 years. Everything important about the bicycle was always there. The genius, the years of work, the world-changing potential. I just couldn't see it because I was looking at the wrong things. I saw rust when I should have seen persistence. I saw duct tape when I should have seen problem-solving. Henry taught me how to truly see, not appearances but substance, not status symbols but real worth. Once you learn to see clearly, you can never go back. The rusty bicycle would never run again. Museum preservation required it remain still, frozen as a historical artifact. But in a deeper, truer sense, it was still running, still powering change across the world, still challenging assumptions, still teaching everyone who saw it that value doesn't depend on recognition, that quiet persistence changes everything, that sometimes the most important innovations come from the people we least expect. The bicycle had changed the world 15 years ago, and it was still changing the world now. Marcus thought about all the invisible people still in the world, the janitors working night shifts nobody notices, the maintenance workers keeping everything running behind the scenes, the service staff making modern life possible while going unseen. How many of them carried their own rusty bicycles, their own brilliant ideas, their own world-changing potential that nobody recognized because they were too busy judging by appearances? The thought filled Marcus with hope, because Henry had proven something profound. Eventually, if you persist long enough, if you stay true to your values, the world catches up. Eventually, people see. The parking lot where it all began looked completely different now. Where Marcus once mocked a rusty bicycle, water engine vehicles now filled every space. Where cruelty once lived, compassion now thrived. Where blind ambition once ruled, purposeful service now guided. That morning 15 years ago, Marcus Chen thought he understood success. He understood nothing. The rusty bicycle taught him everything that actually mattered. 3 lessons, 3 truths that Henry lived and Marcus learned. Value doesn't depend on recognition. It exists whether anyone sees it or not. Quiet persistence changes the world. Not dramatic gestures, but consistent dedication to what matters. And every person has dignity waiting to be seen. Genius, kindness, and potential exist everywhere if we just learn to look beyond the surface. These weren't just nice sentiments. They were the principles that literally transformed industries, cleaned the planet, and changed millions of lives. And now the question comes to you. What are you overlooking in your own life? What rusty bicycles are you dismissing because they don't look impressive? Who around you is doing invisible work that deserves recognition? What possibilities are you missing because you're judging by appearances rather than substance? Henry's bicycle asks us all to look closer, to see clearly, to recognize that genius, kindness, and world-changing potential often come in the most unexpected packages. Will you see it, or will you walk past, like everyone did for 7 years, never knowing what you missed? Every morning now, at Chen Technologies, something different happens. When workers arrive, regardless of their role or title, they're greeted with respect. The janitors are seen. The maintenance staff are valued. Because everyone who works there knows the story. They've walked past that bike rack with its memorial plaque. They've visited the museum. They've learned that the person you ignore today might be carrying the future in their hands. The culture hasn't just changed at Chen Technologies. It's changing across industries, across companies, wherever the lesson of the rusty bicycle has spread. Every day, the sun rises on a world transformed. Not completely. There's still so much work to do. But different, better, moving in the right direction. Communities gaining clean water. Companies embracing responsibility. Young people choosing purpose over pure profit. Innovation coming from unexpected places. And somewhere in that sunrise, you can almost see it, the shadow of a rusty bicycle, still pedaling forward, still creating change, still proving that another way is possible. And there, standing before the bicycle, is the next Henry Morrison. Maybe they're a student right now, dreaming of solutions the world hasn't imagined yet. Maybe they're working a job others overlook, quietly building the future in their spare time. Maybe they feel invisible, wondering if they matter, questioning if their ideas have value. This story tells them yes. Yes, you matter. Yes, your ideas have worth. Yes, your quiet persistence can change the world. Don't give up. Keep pedaling forward. Someday, the world will see what you've known all along. As Marcus walked out of the museum that evening, he felt at peace. The journey from arrogant CEO to humble servant of humanity had been long and painful, but it had been worth every difficult moment, worth every time he had to admit he was wrong and choose to be better. He thought about tomorrow, the communities still needing help, the young people needing mentorship, the changes still necessary to build a truly sustainable and just world. So much work left to do, but that was okay, because success isn't a destination you reach. It's a direction you choose. The work continues. Every day, new communities gain access to clean water and power. New engineers are inspired to solve problems that matter. New business leaders choose responsibility over ruthless profit. New children learn that their value doesn't depend on how others see them. The bicycle's lesson keeps spreading, keeps teaching, keeps transforming lives. Because this isn't a story about one invention or one transformation. It's about a fundamental shift in how we see each other and what we value. And that shift is still happening, still growing, still changing the world one person at a time. Every night, the museum closes. The crowds leave. The lights dim. But the bicycle remains, rust, duct tape, wire and all. Still teaching, still inspiring, still proving that what matters most is often hidden beneath the surface. That genius can come from anywhere. That persistence triumphs over doubt. That kindness is stronger than cruelty. That change is always possible. And that every person, every single person, has dignity, has potential, has value, whether or not anyone recognizes it. The rusty bicycle changed the world once. And every day, in hearts and minds across the globe, it changes the world again. What will you do with the lesson? How will you see differently? Who will you choose to notice? The bicycle is waiting. The question is waiting. And so is the future, rusty, unexpected, and absolutely revolutionary.